Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Work at Home Rockstar Podcast. Today I'm talking to the founding member and CPA of Bright Budget. And what he does is he helps self-employed entrepreneurs to understand the US tax code, which sounds like a big job. Really. So excited to be rocking out today with George Azar. Hey, George, you ready to rock?
I'm ready. Let's do it. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So we always start off on a good note. So tell me a story of success that we can be inspired by.
Yeah, so I actually started my business with the intent of focusing on lower and middle class individuals. And so I worked at some of the big firms and was looking at internally how, their practices, really catered to the ultra wealthy. So I was really inspired during the pandemic actually to go on my own fully and really embrace the self-employment journey, practice what I preach, to my clients. And so ever since then, I actually haven't had to market at all. I ended up, building up my client base from word of mouth. So it's been really cool because I was able to identify what my mission was and what I was able to basically accomplish.
Wow. Okay. Right on. So now along the path, though, sometimes things don't all go as planned. And I do like to talk about the good note and the bad note. So I'm wondering, can you share with me something that didn't go as planned and how you recovered?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started going on my own, it kind of was I would say, a knee-jerk reaction. I was really disenfranchised, especially during the pandemic, and really seeing where a lot of resources were being, pushed towards making, the people who, had a lot of money to be able to invest in those resources. And so I ended up, really, it kind of was really choppy for me because even though I know the landscape with employment, it was kind of a rude awakening for me. So, being able to comply with local and state, regulatory bodies, I would say, my specialty is really in taxation. So, I thought I could do it on my own, and come to realize that I had formed my entity. From a tax perspective, it was advantageous, but from a legal perspective, it wasn't the correct approach. So I had to basically, spend a lot more money than I intended to get it right, to correct it, and make sure that. So it was a real learning lesson, in being reliant on other people that are experienced in other um, uh, I guess specialties, if you will, than me specifically.
Okay. Okay. And so have you made any changes since then to to avoid problems like that in the future?
Absolutely. It's funny. Now if I feel uncomfortable about something, like if a client asks me for specific requests, like there's this potential client who had, they were living in multiple states in a given tax year. And, old me prior to that probably would have been like, let's take this on, let's figure it out together.
Mm,
Um, but now it's taught me to really know what my limitations are, and being able to rely on, tax attorneys, business attorneys, just making sure that I'm not trying to quote unquote save the world, without
yeah.
having that being well equipped for it.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good. A really good point is like part of what the niching down, thing is, right? When you try to figure out exactly what you do and how you help people, the more specialized you become, the better you are at doing that. And it also makes it a little bit easier because you know exactly who you're searching for, right?
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is that, knowing our limitations, and not, because it could be psychological, it could be, expectations, anything like that. But, we're better equipped to serve our clients, our friends, all of that, when we know what our limitations are, as
Mm.
opposed to trying to take it on. I'm a fiercely independent person. I've always been a fiercely independent person. And so it was a really humbling experience to say, actually, no, this is my limitation. I'm not going to, one, put my client in a bad position. Two, I'm not going to put my credentials in jeopardy for having a decision that ultimately, I wasn't well equipped to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is tough because I think as many entrepreneurs probably are problem solvers and they like that challenge, right? And so it can be very tempting to jump into something going, yeah, I don't know how to do that yet, but I bet you I could figure it out, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's been multiple experiences with that, and it actually builds goodwill with your clients when you say, look, I know my limitations. They trust you more because you're not basically, stringing them along, and so they know that you are taking, due diligence and making sure that you are taking care of them in every aspect.
Right. So now, on the money side and the tax side, I'm sure you deal with cash flow and all that those kinds of conversations all the time. Can you give us some tips, some things that we need to know about, making sure that you have the positive cash flow and keeping the hat full?
Absolutely. This one I get all the time, especially for new entrepreneurs, that are trying to figure it out. One of the biggest misconceptions that people have is that, having multiple bank accounts hurts your credit score. That's actually not true at all. Credit is basically from borrowing, whether it's a loan or it's a credit card or anything like that. So what I started to do, and this is before I went on my own, I would open up multiple business accounts and I would fund those accounts. So I would say, okay, my Chase account is for my rent. And so I would make sure that there was enough money. It's kind of it
Oh
forces
yeah.
you into budgeting without
Hmm.
looking at a spreadsheet. Um, my Charles Schwab account is for my utilities. My, Wells Fargo account is for my fund. So you're basically like, taking whatever you have and putting that into those bank accounts and making sure that, that they're funded in order to cover those expenses. And I think that's my number one go-to is having multiple bank accounts to help me budget better.
Oh, that's cool. So I do that as well, but I do it with virtual accounts within the same bank. But what you're saying is you get an extra benefit by opening up different bank accounts in different banks, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I see that. I love that approach too because it makes it easier. Like if you need to do a transfer, it's instantly. Like I have my business account and one of my rent account with Chase.
Yeah.
And I do love that because like it allows you to like funnel that. It's an instant deposit. The different bank mentality is, it's kind of a leave it and forget it mentality. So like
Mhm.
if I know that like that money isn't there, I'm not going to use it for other things. So like if you have a problem with like, seeing, $2,000 in a bank account, okay, I want to spend that as, as quickly as possible. Going to different institutions helps you say, okay, I'm throwing that money in there. I'm going to forget about it. And so it essentially like, prevents you from using that money for other things.
That's funny. So just something that I've discovered about myself. So I tend to work harder when my bank account is lower. So
Mm.
so I actually use that exact same strategy that you just said. Like I'll move money out of it immediately into other accounts. As long as that one main account is low, then I'm hustling. Because I did notice once it starts to balloon right up and I've got a whole bunch of money in there, I'm like, I'll take a day off, whatever. Like
Yeah.
so, so it's
I
funny.
res
Yeah.
I resonate with that because I'm the same way too. Like if it goes below a certain amount, I'm like, okay, you're right. Like,
I gotta get to
where can I
work.
find work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and using those virtual accounts is enough. I mean, you're moving it out. It's out. It's in some other account, and it's not the initial one that you see when you open up your bank app, right? And it's it's just the way it works.
Exactly.
Hmm. That's
Exactly.
awesome.
No, that's
That's a really good advice, and I think I mean also for the budgeting reason, I think that's a great idea as well. I mean, you have all these different accounts that have different purposes for your budget, right? So you know how much play money you have left. You know how much money you need for your utilities and all that stuff. I like it. It's a great idea.
Yeah, I would say another thing too, and this is where a lot of self-employed people, especially if you're just starting out, having an account for taxes. Like my general rule is, depending on whether you have state income taxes or anything like that, put aside 25 to 30% of your gross income. So like, you get an invoice for $10,000, like instantly put, 2,500 to $3,000 inside of a separate account for taxes because the biggest thing is income taxes are what we call a progressive tax system. It incrementally increases as your income. So as a CPA, I'm not as concerned about the income tax. What I am concerned about is that self-employment tax, which is
Yep.
the Social Security, Medicare, 15.3% across the board on net income. So that's a big one is that, I would say that should be a separate bank account in and of itself.
Agreed. And overfund it too. Yeah, because I've gotten
Hmm.
into tax trouble. I'm in Canada actually, so our rules are different, but probably very similar. And And yeah, I mean, it's just that whole thing about taxes is just something that doesn't get taught, right? And you
Yes.
become self-employed, all of a sudden you start making this money and you don't really understand how much you're going to need to pay because I mean you're saying you're helping people understand the tax code. Man, I've been doing this for, almost 20 years now, and I still don't understand them exactly. I know what I need to put aside.
Yeah.
And that has, come from trial and error. But I do like that idea of just put 30%, or even 35% in another account. It's gone. And then you can treat it as a tax return. Like when
Yeah.
you were employed, I mean, they were putting money away, and then you'd get a tax return at the end of the year. Why not do it the same way? And then at least it sits in your account and gains a little bit of interest while it's sitting there, right?
Exactly, exactly. And that's the thing, like, tr non-traditional, brick and mortar banks, like, not, I'm not sponsored by any of them, but like Goldman
Yep.
Sachs, American Express, they have higher interest rates because they don't have the overhead. So, you could accrue 3 to 4, 5% on that money just sitting there in that account. So yeah, exactly. You're earning money on that money that's eventually going to go to the government.
Yep, exactly. Yep, absolutely. Another one that I did, and I'm not sure if you recommend this, but I have my credit card has lots of great points on it, and I
Mhm.
like to use it, but you can get in trouble using a credit card. So I just have another virtual account where every time I spend money on my credit card, it goes directly into that virtual account. So there's always an equal number in that account ready to pay the credit card off.
I love that. And that's exactly it. The credit card points only work if you're paying off that credit card every single month. The
Hmm.
minute there's a balance that carries over to the next month, you're accruing interest. And so essentially, in most credit cards, you're getting, 1 point for $1. So it's 1%. But if you have an APY of, 26%, you've already eaten that up in that next month. So that's very smart is, essentially having that bank account solely for credit card and put that credit card on auto payment. So,
Yeah.
essentially it's taken care of so you don't forget about it.
Yeah, because it's even worse if you like miss that minimum payment even. Like, come on,
Yeah.
right? Now you're in real
Yeah.
trouble, right? And it hurts your credit score and all that other stuff, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's where people get in trouble, utilization ratio, your ability to pay. Like credit cards are the number one reason why people have dings against their credit score. So absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about working from home, your jam room, your space. Like, how do you have that set up for you?
Yeah, it's evolved over the years. It's funny. During the pandemic, I ended up, having my room or sorry, my desk in my living room, and it's interesting. I was actually reading some studies on this. They said don't put your office inside of your bedroom because you want to have that, that bifurcation of,
Uh-huh.
work and personal and rest and all of that. So I actually ended up reorganizing my office to having there's this this awkward wall that I have that I had a bookcase there and I ended up moving my desk there and it's really nice because my back is to my living room and all I see is this wall and so I decorated the wall with inspirational stuff. I left up some Christmas lights, just make it really like homey and really fun to be at. And then essentially having a space in your home that is separated. You're not looking at your personal. So when you do leave that desk, you feel like you're actually leaving work, like you would
Yeah.
at a W-2 job.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important as well. And having some sort of inspiration and being excited to be there and all that stuff, right?
Absolutely. Like I have my credentials up, I have some artwork. I'm really into astronomy, not astrology, astronomy. So I have the Corona supernova up on my wall. I have different sci-fi stuff that I love to watch. So yeah, having that inspiration really does help me get through the day.
Nice. Man, I'm fascinated by both astronomy and astrology. I find they both are
Yeah.
fascinating to me. But tell me, so now let's talk a little bit about practicing and I mean for you, I mean it must be so difficult to keep up on all the changing rules as things go on. Like how do you stay sharp at what you do?
Yeah, great question. So as a CPA, I am required to do minimum educational requirements to keep my certification in good standing. So that, is kind of a barrier for me. I join a couple organizations they'll send me like newsletters every time, a tax code changes or something along those lines. And then essentially, I'll dive into that. The other thing is software or practice management software. So I have a CRM tool
Okay.
that really helps me keeps, I'll set a deadline and it'll notify me when that deadline's approaching, making sure that, my clients, when they upload files, that I'm getting a notification for that. So having a strong CRM tool has saved me. I used to use Google Drive and I used to do an Excel tracker, and it really didn't motivate me like it does with like having a professional service, paying that extra, $20 a month it's almost like a virtual assistant of sorts because it allows my clients to have a portal. It looks a lot more professional. They could I could create invoices and submit invoices in there. I can, upload their tax returns, share files, and obviously, I'm sharing sensitive information, so I need to make sure that it's protected, and so making sure that you're signing up for those systems that set you up to succeed and make those deadlines, as opposed to having your work scattered everywhere. So like it's reduced a lot more of my efficient, or giving me more time for efficiency for analyzing and preparing tax returns by just knowing that I have a system that keeps me accountable.
Right on. So which one do you use and how did you find it?
Yeah, so I actually tested out five different ones. There's a lot of like, there's like Asana, there's Monday, there's all
There is.
these, you know,
Hmm.
general ones like, but I have a tax specific one. It's called Canopy, and there's a couple others out there that are specifically for tax practitioners. So, signed up for the demos. I did all of the demos. I watched it. I was able to play in the system, and it really comes down to your process and what are the most, important aspects of those features that they provide. Because like, Asana has really good features, but they were limited as far as like, especially being a tax practitioner, they're, sharing information, all of that. So really testing out those CRM options and seeing what specifically helps you. And if you're in an industry where there is a practice management tool that is specifically catered to your industry, I would say prioritize those over the others, and just test them out, go through their demos, and it costs nothing to do that.
Yeah, a lot of these tools do have free trials and all that stuff. And I mean, what I find cool about using some of these tools is that, okay, fine, you might have a process that you're trying to follow and all that stuff, but you also get ideas, right? Because you start to
Yeah.
see how it's set up and you're like, oh, okay, so that's how everybody else is doing it. And you might have, some good nuggets there, right?
Exactly. Like there's templates in there, and specifically as a tax practitioner, we have specific steps that we have to take in order. We send out the engagement, so they have an engagement, template. You could modify that. It gives you that flexibility to be able to modify it specifically to your practice. And then there's, also with task management, like they have other templates in there that are specifically for, specific types of tax returns. And so it allows you could do automation. So once, the engagement is signed, it sends out an email saying, hey, here are the next steps. And it allows the client to go in there and check off their steps and all of that. Like I don't utilize all of those services, but
Yeah.
knowing that they're there is awesome, knowing that it's like a buffer for me to not let something slip through the cracks.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about, I'm wondering, do you like outside of your business practices, do you have any like personal practices, like any routines that keep you motivated or anything like that?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't been great with that. One of the things I've been, yeah, I'm starting to get back into it, like, stretching in the morning,
Mm,
grabbing my cup of coffee, taking my dog out, for a walk, leaving my phone behind. One of the things in the last several months I've been, I guess, chronically on social media. And so, I go to therapy and, talk to my therapist about best practices. And, so I'll leave my phone behind. I'll spend the first hour, or at least try to spend the first hour, waking up and being present and just making sure that, I'm mentally preparing for the day, as opposed to where I used to just come, wake up, walk my dog, come in, sit at my desk, and then start answering emails. Like it just, my energy levels were starting to dip. So having that hour to really take care of yourself, that's the beauty of being self-employed, is that, our calendar is we could do that for ourselves. So I block off 2 hours during the lunchtime to do a workout. I'll work out from home. And so just making sure that you're taking care of yourself, because it is hard, especially when you're self-employed,
Hmm.
you're not reporting to anyone but your clients. And so having those boundaries and having, making sure that, like, I won't answer an email unless I'm in busy season after 6 p.m. Because it sets a precedent for my clients that if I respond at 9 o'clock at night, that they expect me every time that I'm going to respond to that time. So just making sure that you have, those boundaries in place, that you're taking care of your personal life, so you can dedicate that time to your work life.
Yeah, I love that. And now, just out of curiosity, now how do you feel that the clients respond to those types of boundaries? Do you think they're upset, or do you think that they like what do you think?
Yeah, initially, because when I first started, I would be responding all the time. And so what I did was actually I bought another line on my cell phone plan and bought another phone and dedicated it only to business. And so, and then I would update my hours, and I would put in my signature line that, look, this is my time that I respond and all of that. And at first, because I had set that precedent that, I'm available 24/7, there were a couple of clients that were annoyed by it.
Yeah.
But as I started to, like, really enforce that and protect my boundaries, people started to really, adapt to that, because that's the thing. Like, we set the tone. If
Yeah.
we're, constantly doing that, they do expect us to respond. But there's a handful of clients. I have monthly clients that I have, that I'll respond to more, outside of those boundaries, but that's only reserved for those monthly clients. And so, yeah, it's really, you set the tone, and the client eventually will. And that's the thing too. Look, if you're going to lose a client that is not respecting your boundaries, that probably is a client that you don't need to work with.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. And I mean, now, especially if it's by email, I mean, you can always set the email to be sent in the morning, like because I mean, there are times maybe you just are feeling inspired to work at 7 p.m. or whatever it is, and
Yeah.
like you say, you don't want to send that email out right then because now they're going to expect it every time. But you could just set it to send in the morning at 8 a.m. or whatever it is, and go to bed, right?
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. Like in my signature line, especially during the busy season, I put a notice. I say, please note that during busy season, I don't respond as quickly as I normally do.
Yeah,
Thank you for your understanding. Not like, giving permission, but
yeah.
saying this is what the boundary is.
Right on. So, George, it's time for your guest solo. So tell me what's exciting in your business right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The more so I started off my practice in doing tax preparation, and over the years I've been getting more into education. I started teaching part-time temporary at a local university, and really, like, I've over the last 5, 6 years, I've discovered that, like, my passion is really in education. So I ended up starting Bright Budget a couple of years ago. I actually wrote the script for the Self-Employment 101 course back during COVID. And thankfully, because of my practice, I was able to have the resources to be able to build this course out. But yeah, what's really exciting right now is that I've gotten to a point where I don't advertise. It's all word of mouth. I've had to turn down people. So I'm in a position now where that I could really, like, pivot myself away from the stuff that I don't necessarily find much passion in, and pursue my passion of teaching and guiding people and giving them the tools to be able to do that. So that, I would say, in the last couple of years, that's really been exciting for me, is that I'm diving into these educational opportunities.
Right on. Cool. So then how do people find you?
Yeah, so my website is brightbudget.com. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. My TikTok handle is brightbudget. On Instagram, it's brightbudgetmedia. And then, yeah, I have opportunities where people can book a 15-minute free consultation to see if we're good to, work together. Again, like, I'm not taking on tax preparation. I'm taking on more consulting and educational side of things.
So what type of person would get the most out of working with you then?
I would say anybody who is considers themselves self-employed, that includes freelancers, contractors, whether they've been in the game for, several decades or they're just starting out. It really is anybody who's in the United States that considers themselves a self-employed individual. That's really my niche.
Okay, right on. And I do recommend that if people do reach out to somebody who's got a little bit of experience if you're first getting started, because I mean the tax bills, especially if you're making a lot of money, I think that's the issue I came into was on the years that I had exceptionally well, especially early on,
Mhm.
didn't know how much I was going to need to pay in tax, right? And that's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's an odd problem, right? But my best years were my worst ones when it came to not being prepared properly. And that might be surprising to people, I think, right?
Absolutely. And a lot of times, people get information just from social media and,
Hmm.
there's a lot of information and, it's important to realize that, people who are creating content on social media do have a monetary incentive. And so, I often get, TikToks or Instagram reels from clients that say, "Hey, can we do this with our
Yeah.
taxes?" And then I have to explain it, like no, yes and no, like these are very specific. So yeah, there's a lot of information out there, but it's a whole other thing to get good information, and it's specifically for your situation. That's the thing. Taxes is not a one size fits all. Where like one person may benefit from an S corporation, another person might because of how their businesses are structured.
Yes, and that's what you hear a lot of too, is that every situation is somewhat different. And so yeah,
Mhm.
you're right. I mean, when you see a TikTok and go, "Oh yeah, this looks awesome," you try to implement it in your business, it's not going to work. And sometimes it will.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the benefit of having someone like you that you can fire off that TikTok and see what happens, right?
Absolutely. And that's the thing, S Corp, I became an S Corp specialist because of people who got information from TikTok, either to create an S corporation or not to do one. So it's like, exactly, like it's always good to have a professional, like look at your specific situation, and not just, take a one size fits all approach.
Right on. Okay, last question. Let's get into the music a little bit. So tell me, who's your favorite rock star?
Oh my gosh, it's vacillated. It used to be Taylor Swift. Now it's I love Sabrina Carpenter.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
more of a pop person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. That's awesome. Yeah, my band, we've got two new Taylor Swift songs that we're adding for this weekend's gig. We're quite excited about it.
Oh,
Just
nice. Oh my
yeah,
gosh,
just
which
from
ones?
her new album. We're gonna do The Fate of Ophelia and Opalite.
Oh my gosh, those are so good.
I
Oh my
like
gosh,
them
I want to hear.
both. Yeah.
Are you gonna record them?
I don't know. Well, I won't be recording it myself because I'll be on stage,
Yeah,
but I'll see what happens. Maybe someone will record it for us. But
I would love to hear them.
but yeah, I'm excited for those ones. We've got a really great singer in the band, and so we just played those on Monday at the practice, and they went so well. So I'm
Oh, I
excited.
love that.
Yeah, we try to do like the new stuff too. So, and sometimes it can be quite difficult to do. Like the production is different now than it was in the 60s, right? But
Yeah.
but some of them translate pretty good. Yeah.
Covers are amazing. I love covers. I love an artist just like take other artists and reimagine it or, different genre, different vibe. It's amazing.
Yeah, right on. Well, thank you so much, George, for rocking out with me today. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing.
Awesome. And to the listeners, make sure you go to workathomorockstar.com for more information. We'll see you next time on the Work at Home Rockstar podcast.